I was 7 years old when I first saw him, sitting right there in the third row, 2 seats away from mine, and I remember thinking his eyes looked like they held secrets bigger than both of us. You know that feeling when you meet someone and your whole future just flashes before your eyes? No, well, maybe you will by the end of this story, because what I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about love, about life, about what it means to say goodbye when you've barely had time to say hello. They called him Tommy back then, Tommy Richards. And he had this way of laughing that made the whole classroom feel warmer, like sunshine breaking through windows on a cold February morning. I was Sarah Mitchell, just a girl with braids too tight and shoes too small. But when he looked at me, I felt like I was somebody worth remembering. We shared our lunches, we shared our dreams, we shared everything except the time we thought we'd have forever. He used to tell me he wanted to be a doctor, wanted to save lives, wanted to make a difference in this broken world we were growing up in. And me, I just wanted to grow old with him. I wanted wrinkles that matched his hands, that fit together like puzzle pieces, worn smooth by decades of holding on. I wanted morning coffee and evening walks and all those ordinary moments that make up an extraordinary life. Is that too much to ask? I didn't think so then. And honestly, I don't think so now. We grew up side by side, like 2 trees planted too close together, our roots tangling beneath the surface where nobody could see. Elementary school turned into middle school turned into high school, and through it all, Tommy Richards was there, always there. Like he was written into every chapter of my story, before I even knew what the plot would be. We'd sit on his mama's porch in the summers, drinking sweet tea that was more sugar than anything else, talking about colleges we'd apply to, cities we'd move to, the little house we'd buy with a white picket fence, because that's what people did back then. That's what dreams looked like in 1960. I remember the exact moment everything changed. I remember it like it was burned into my memory with a hot iron. We were 22 years old, fresh out of college, him from medical school at Johns Hopkins, me with a teaching degree I wasn't sure I'd ever use because all I really wanted was to be Mrs. Tommy Richards. It was a Saturday afternoon in October 1975. The leaves were turning those colors that make you believe in magic, reds and golds and oranges that looked like the world was on fire in the most beautiful way possible. He took me to Miller's Creek, that little spot where we'd had our first kiss when we were 16, where he'd told me he loved me for the first time when we were 18, where every important moment of our lives seemed to circle back to like it was the center of our universe. He got down on one knee, right there in the dirt and the fallen leaves, and he pulled out this tiny ring, nothing fancy, just a simple silver band with a diamond so small you had to squint to see it sparkle. But it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, and his voice was shaking like autumn leaves in a strong wind. "I've loved you since I was 7 years old, and I'm going to love you until the day I die, and probably long after that. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend whatever time I have left on this earth trying to make you as happy as you've made me? Whatever time I have left." Those words should have been a warning, should have been a sign. But I was so caught up in the moment, so lost in his eyes and that ring, and the word yes that was bursting out of my chest, that I didn't hear what he was really saying. I didn't hear the goodbye hidden inside the hello. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I would have said yes if he'd asked me with a ring made of grass and dandelions. I would have said yes if there was no ring at all. I would have said yes to anything as long as it meant being his. We kissed like teenagers, we laughed like children, we planned our future like we had all the time in the world spread out before us like an endless highway with no stop signs and no dead ends. The wedding was set for June 1976, 6 months away, just enough time to plan something small and simple, because neither of us wanted anything big or fancy. We just wanted each other and maybe 50 of our closest friends and family watching us. Promised forever. I found a dress at a little shop downtown, nothing expensive. Just white lace and silk that made me feel like a princess from one of those fairy tales my mama used to read me before bed. Everything was perfect. Everything was falling into place. Everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. And then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday evening in November 1975, 3 weeks after he proposed, and I was at my apartment grading papers from my third-grade class because I'd taken that teaching job after all. Figured I'd work until we had babies, and then maybe go back when they were older. The phone rang, and when I answered, it was Tommy's voice on the other end, but it didn't sound like him. It sounded hollow and distant, like he was calling from the bottom of a well. "Sarah," he said. Just my name, nothing else, and I knew before he said another word that something was terribly, horribly wrong. "What is it?" I asked, my heart already breaking before I even knew what I was losing. "I need you to come to the hospital," he said. "I need you to come right now." I drove faster than I should have, ran every yellow light, may have run a red one too. I don't remember. All I remember is the fear wrapping around my throat like hands trying to strangle me. When I got to County General, he was sitting in the waiting room, still in his white coat because he'd been doing his residency there, still looking like the man I'd loved my whole life, but different somehow, like someone had reached inside and turned off a light that had always been burning. He took my hands in his, and they were cold, so cold, and he said words that I still hear echoing in my head 5 decades later. "It's cancer, Sarah. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. They give me 3 months, maybe 6 if I'm lucky." Have you ever felt the world stop spinning? Have you ever felt your heart actually break? Not metaphorically, but actually crack right down the middle, like glass hitting concrete. That's what it felt like, standing there in that fluorescent-lit waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and despair, realizing that the future I'd been planning, the life I'd been dreaming about since I was 7 years old, was vanishing like smoke in a strong wind. Before you click away, before you move on to the next video, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Are you in your living room? Are you lying in bed? Are you sitting at your kitchen table with a cup of coffee, getting cold while you listen to an old woman tell you about the worst day of her life? Leave me a comment. Tell me where you are right now, because I want to know who's listening. I want to know who's still believing in love stories even when they end too soon. The doctors talked about treatment options, about chemotherapy and radiation, and clinical trials, about fighting and staying positive and never giving up hope. But Tommy looked at me with those eyes that I'd been looking into my whole life, and he said, "I don't want to spend whatever time I have left sick and suffering, throwing up in hospital bathrooms and losing my hair and feeling like death is chasing me. I want to spend it with you, really with you, making memories instead of making myself miserable." So that's what we decided to do. We moved the wedding up, started planning for December instead of June, started trying to squeeze a lifetime into a few short months. His mama cried, my mama cried, everybody cried, but we tried to stay strong, tried to focus on the joy instead of the sorrow, tried to hold on to happiness even as it was slipping through our fingers like sand. But the cancer didn't care about our timeline, didn't care about our plans, didn't care about 2 kids who'd loved each other since they were children and just wanted a chance to be married before one of them died. It moved fast, faster than anyone expected, and by the first week of December 1975, Tommy was in the hospital full-time, too weak to come home, too sick to pretend everything was going to be okay. I'll never forget what he said to me on December 7th, 3 weeks before we were supposed to get married, 2 weeks before the doctors said he probably wouldn't make it. We were sitting in his hospital room. Well, he was lying in the bed, connected to machines that beeped and hummed and counted down the seconds of his life. And I was sitting beside him holding his hand that felt like paper, thin and fragile and ready to tear. "Marry me now," he whispered, his voice barely strong enough to carry across the space between us. "Right here, right now. Don't wait, don't plan. Just marry me before it's too late." I didn't argue, didn't question, didn't ask how or when or what about the dress and the flowers and the people who were supposed to be there. I just nodded, squeezed his hand as gently as I could because I was afraid I might hurt him, and I said, "Okay, yes, let's do it." The next morning, I woke up in my apartment. looked at the wedding dress hanging in my closet, the one I was supposed to wear in 2 weeks, with my hair done perfect and my makeup just right, and a bouquet of roses in my hands. I took it off the hanger, that beautiful white dress that was supposed to be for the happiest day of my life, and I put it on right there in my bedroom with no help, no makeup, no anything except the ring on my finger and the love in my heart. I looked at myself in the mirror, this girl in a wedding dress with tears already starting to fall, mascara I hadn't bothered to put on, hair I hadn't bothered to curl, and I thought, this is not how it's supposed to be. This is not the story I was promised. This is not fair. This is not right. This is not how love stories are supposed to end. But I went anyway, because what else was I going to do? I drove to the hospital in my wedding dress, got stares from people at red lights, got whispers from people in the parking lot, walked through those automatic doors in white lace and silk like I was walking into a church instead of a building where people came to die. The nurses knew me by then. They'd seen me every day for weeks, but when they saw me in that dress, they understood. They knew what was happening, and some of them cried right there at their stations. I walked down that hallway, that long fluorescent hallway that smelled like cleaning supplies and death, my heels clicking on linoleum floors that had seen thousands of tragedies before mine, and would see thousands more after. I was carrying one white rose, just one, because that's all they had in the hospital gift shop, and it seemed appropriate somehow. This single flower for this singular moment that was both a beginning and an ending, all wrapped up together. When I opened the door to his room, Tommy was awake, staring at the ceiling, like he was looking for answers in the water stains and cracks. He turned his head slowly. It took effort now. Everything took effort. And when he saw me standing there in that dress, he started to cry. Not quiet tears, not dignified tears, but big, sobbing tears that shook his whole body and made the machines beat faster, like they were alarmed that his heart was breaking along with mine. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice cracking on every syllable. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Sarah, you're perfect. You're everything." The hospital chaplain came in, a nice man named Father Michael who'd been visiting Tommy every day, praying with him when Tommy had the strength to pray, sitting with him in silence when he didn't. There was no music, no wedding march, no bridesmaids walking down an aisle in matching dresses, just me standing beside a hospital bed in my wedding dress, holding one white rose and the hand of the only man I'd ever loved. Father Michael said the words, the traditional words about sickness and health, richer and poorer, better and worse, until death do us part. And oh, how those last words hurt, how they cut like knives, because death was right there in the room with us, standing in the corner, waiting patiently for its turn. Tommy said "I do" in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it over the sound of the heart monitor and the oxygen machine, and my own heart shattering into a million tiny pieces. When it was my turn, I looked at him, really looked at him, at this man who'd been my whole world since I was 7 years old. This man who was dying at 22 with so much life left and I said "I do" like I was making a promise, not just for this lifetime but for every lifetime after, for every universe where we might get a second chance at the forever we were being robbed of now. There was no kiss. He was too weak for that. So I just pressed my forehead against his and felt his breath on my face and tried to memorize every single detail of this moment, because I knew it was all I was going to have to carry me through the rest of my life without him. "I'm sorry," he whispered against my skin. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I wanted to give you everything. I wanted to give you 50 years and grandchildren and Sunday dinners and everything you deserved. You gave me enough." I lied. Because it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But what else could I say? We were married for 4 days. 4 days of me sitting beside his bed in sweatpants and one of his old t-shirts, because I couldn't bring myself to put on the wedding dress again. 4 days of holding his hand and telling him stories about the life we would have had, the children we would have raised, the house we would have filled with love and laughter, and all the beautiful ordinary moments that make up a marriage. 4 days of watching him slip further and further away, his breath getting shallower, his grip getting weaker, his eyes getting dimmer. On December 11, 1975, At 3:27 in the morning, the machines started making different sounds, urgent sounds, sounds that brought nurses running. I was asleep in the chair beside his bed, exhausted from days of not sleeping. And when I woke up, Tommy was looking at me with eyes that seemed clearer than they'd been in weeks, like someone had turned a light back on one last time. "I'm going to love you forever," he said, clear as day, strong as thunder, certain as sunrise. "Even when I'm gone, I'm going to love you, Sarah. I'm going to love you from wherever I end up. And someday, when it's your time, I'm going to be waiting for you." "I know," I said, "because what else is there to say when your husband is dying and making promises about eternity?" "Don't be alone," he said. "Don't spend your whole life mourning me. Find someone else, get married again, have babies, be happy." But I knew even then that I wouldn't, that I couldn't, that there was no space in my heart for anyone else, because he'd taken up every inch of it, and when he left he'd be taking it with him. He died while I was holding his hand, just stopped breathing between 1 second and the next, and the last thing he saw was my face, and the last thing I said to him was, "I love you," and then he was gone. And I was a widow at 22 years old, with a marriage that lasted 4 days and a lifetime of emptiness stretching out ahead of me. They asked me about funeral arrangements, about where to send the body, about what kind of service I wanted, and I couldn't answer any of it because I couldn't process that Tommy Richards, the boy who'd shared my lunch when we were 7, who'd kissed me by the creek when we were 16, who'd married me in a hospital room when we were 22, was now just a body, just something to be sent somewhere and buried in the ground. His mama planned the funeral. I was useless. I was broken. I was a ghost walking through a world that didn't make sense anymore. They buried him in Oakwood Cemetery under a tree that would bloom white flowers every spring, and I stood there in black instead of white, holding one white rose instead of a bouquet. And I didn't cry because I had no tears left. I'd cried them all out in that hospital room. After the funeral, people told me I was young, told me I'd move on, told me I'd find love again someday, but they didn't understand. They couldn't understand that you don't move on from your first love, your only love, your forever love. You just learn to live around the hole they left behind. I went back to teaching because I needed something to do with my days, needed a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I taught 3rd grade for 43 years. Watched thousands of children grow up and move on and forget about Miss Mitchell, who never smiled quite right and always seemed a little sad even when she was laughing. I never dated, never let another man take me to dinner or hold my hand or kiss me goodnight, because how could I when I was still married in my heart to someone who'd been dead for decades? Every year on our anniversary, December 7th, I'd go to his grave with one white rose, and I'd sit there and talk to him like he could hear me. I'd tell him about my year, about the students I was teaching, about the world that was changing around me, about how much I missed him, about how I was still wearing his ring, even though it had turned my finger green years ago. I'd tell him I was sorry I couldn't keep my promise to be happy. Sorry I couldn't move on like he asked. Sorry I was wasting my life mourning him instead of living it. But the truth was, I didn't feel like I was wasting anything. Loving Tommy Richards, even after he was gone, even after 40 years had passed and I was 65 years old, with gray hair and wrinkles and aching joints, felt like the most worthwhile thing I'd ever done with my life. I retired from teaching in 2018, moved into a small apartment because I didn't need much space for just me and my memories. I volunteered at a women's shelter, helping women who'd lost everything rebuild their lives, and I suppose there was some irony in that. Me helping other people heal when I'd never healed myself, but maybe that's how it works. Maybe we help others because we know what it's like to be broken and alone, and wondering if life is worth living. The women at the shelter used to ask me about my story, ask me why I never married, why I lived alone, why I seemed so sad all the time even when I was smiling and laughing and pretending everything was fine. And sometimes, when I felt strong enough, I'd tell them about Tommy, about our 4-day marriage, about loving someone so much that losing them feels like losing yourself. Some of them understood, some of them had their own stories of love and loss, of men who died in wars or accidents, or simply walked away leaving holes shaped like their absence. We'd sit there, these broken women and me, and we'd share our pain like it was something holy, something sacred, something that connected us across all the differences in our ages and backgrounds and circumstances. I'm 72 years old now, sitting here in this old school desk in September 2025, in the same classroom where I taught for all those years, where they've kept a few of these wooden desks as memories of how things used to be. The school let me come sit here sometimes, said I was welcome anytime I wanted to visit, and something about being here, in this space where children learned and grew and moved forward with their lives, makes me feel closer to the girl I used to be, the girl who thought she'd have forever. Every night before I go to bed, I touch my ring, that thin silver band that Tommy put on my finger in a hospital room 49 years ago, and I whisper the same thing I've been whispering for nearly 5 decades. If you're ready, come get me. I've been waiting so long, Tommy, I'm tired of waiting. Come get me, and take me wherever you are. Do I believe in heaven? I don't know. I want to think that there's somewhere Tommy is waiting for me, but that smile that made everything better. And those eyes that looked like they held secrets, I want to think that when my time comes, and it will come someday sooner rather than later now, he'll be there at the gates or the tunnel or wherever it is we go, and he'll take my hand and say, I told you I'd wait for you, Sarah, I told you I'd love you forever. But belief is hard when you've spent nearly 50 years alone, when you've watched everyone else get their happy endings, while yours was stolen away after 4 days. Belief is hard when you're old and tired and your body aches, and you wake up every morning wondering why you're still here, when the only person you ever wanted to be here with has been gone for almost half a century. Still, I hold on to that ring, I hold on to those memories, I hold on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, death isn't the end of our story. Maybe it's just an intermission, a pause between acts, and someday when the curtain rises again, Tommy and I will get to finish what we started. We'll get to have our 50 years and our grandchildren, and our Sunday dinners and all those beautiful ordinary moments we were promised but never got. People ask me if I have regrets, if I wish I'd done things differently, if I'm angry at God or fate or whoever decides these things for giving me a love so perfect and then taking it away before I barely had time to enjoy it. And the truth is, I'm not angry, I'm not bitter, I'm just sad, endlessly, eternally sad. But I wouldn't change anything, not one single moment, because those 4 days of being Mrs. Tommy Richards were worth more than a lifetime of being anything else with anyone else. You see, real love isn't about how long it lasts, it's about how deep it goes. Real love isn't measured in years or decades, it's measured in moments, in memories, in the way someone's face looks when they see you walking toward them in a wedding dress, in the last words they whisper before they die, in the ring you wear until your fingers are too swollen to get it off anymore. I loved Tommy Richards for 49 years after he died, and I'll love him for however many years I have left. And when I finally close my eyes for the last time, his name will be the last word on my lips, and his face will be the last thing in my mind. That's what forever means, not growing old together, not sitting on porches watching sunsets, but carrying someone so deep in your heart that even death can't separate you. So here I am, an old woman with a 49-year-old story that still feels like it happened yesterday, telling you about love and loss and living with grief that never really goes away. It just becomes part of who you are. Here I am, still married to a man who's been dead longer than he was alive, still faithful to vows we spoke in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and dying, still believing that somewhere, somehow, we're going to get our happily ever after, even if it's not in this world. If you're watching this and you love someone, tell them right now, today. Don't wait for tomorrow, because tomorrow might not come. Don't waste time being angry or proud or scared. Just tell them you love them and hold them close and be grateful for every single moment you get, because moments are all we really have, and some of us don't get nearly as many as we deserve. I'm ready now, I think, ready for whatever comes next. I've lived my life, I've done my work, I've helped who I could help, and loved who I could love. and now I'm just tired, bone tired, soul tired, waiting for permission to let go. Every night I touch my ring, and I pray that tonight will be the night that I'll close my eyes and open them to find Tommy waiting for me. Young again, healthy again, ready to start the life we never got to have. Some love stories have happy endings with white dresses and church bells and rice thrown in parking lots. Some love stories have sad endings with hospital rooms and funeral homes and graves under trees that bloom white flowers. But all love stories, if they're real, if they're true, are worth telling, worth remembering, worth holding on to, even when holding on hurts more than letting go ever could. This is my love story, mine and Tommy's. 4 days of marriage, and 49 years of mourning, and a lifetime of loving someone who isn't here to love me back but somehow still does every single day. This is my love story, and it's not the one I wanted, but it's the one I got, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in this world or the next. So, touch your ring, whether it's on your finger or in your jewelry box, or buried with someone you loved too much to forget. Touch your ring, and remember that love doesn't die. It doesn't fade, it doesn't disappear, it just changes form, becomes memory instead of moment, becomes faith instead of fact, becomes the thing that keeps you going when everything else falls apart. I'm Sarah Richards. I was married for 4 days 49 years ago in December 1975, and I'm still in love with my husband, and I'm still waiting for him to come get me. And someday soon, I hope, he will. And when he does, when I finally see his face again after all these years of missing him, the first thing I'm going to say is, "What took you so long?" And the second thing I'm going to say is, "Don't ever leave me again." And then we're going to have forever, real forever, not the stolen, abbreviated version we got the first time, but actual forever that never ends and never hurts and never says goodbye. That's my story. That's my truth. That's my testimony to the power of love that lasts longer than life itself. I hope you never have to live it yourself, but if you do, I hope you find the strength to carry on the way I did. One day at a time, one memory at a time, one whispered prayer at a time. Love is worth it, even when it breaks you, even when it leaves you alone for decades, even when all you have left is a ring and a rose and a hope that someday, somehow, somewhere, you'll get to say "I do" again and mean it for all eternity.